Holy ground, common ground. It's something that the Lord, as I've just entered His presence this morning in prayer, I just kept hearing common ground. It's a shared, it's a mutual thing that we have between Jews and Christians, in that we are more alike than we are different. We have more that would unite us than divide us. The prophet Isaiah in his writings in 56, 6-8 says this: "The foreigners who bind themselves to the Lord to serve Him, to love the name of the Lord, and to worship Him, all who keep the Sabbath without desecrating it and who hold fast to my covenant, these I will bring to my holy mountain and give them joy in my house of prayer. For my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations." The sovereign Lord declares, "He who gathers the exiles of Israel, I will gather still others to them beside those already gathered." Right before Yeshua, Jesus, however we want to call Him, the name that means God saves, He reiterated this very thing from Isaiah at the temple. And it said, He taught them and He said, "Is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations"? 14 years ago, when I came to this church, I asked the Lord, what in the world would you want me to do? This place in a multicultural neighborhood. And He said, raise up a house of prayer. So prayer is extremely important to us. And this is what I would say. Prayer unites us, because prayer is connection to the Creator who weaves all purposes under heaven together. Does not our scriptures, we just a few minutes ago say, pray for the peace of Jerusalem? I came across something from a great Jewish scholar, Abraham Joshua Herschel. Some of you may have read his book Sabbath, which is awesome. But I found this not long ago. It's called Israel. It's a landmark book. It was written right after the 1967 war and the regaining of Jerusalem. And he said this: "The words, the songs, the chants of Jewish liturgy, which have shaped the life of prayer in both Judaism and Christianity, were born in the Holy Land. It was in this land that a man of Israel, the son of an Israelite carpenter, proclaimed the gospel of love to the pagan world and cleared the way for the days of Messiah." Our ground is common, shared, and again, I want to say, it is what unites us that is greater than what divides us. I rest my case. And I welcome Gidon Ariel and Bob Odell to come and take your places and share with us.
All right, well, first I would like to thank and honor this hosting opportunity here at Austin Brethren Church. The decision to come to Texas was made, and as it worked out, your first several meetings were in the Dallas area, and you have even been to San Antonio twice since coming here. But while this particular meeting is a bit later in the tour agenda, the decision to come here was the first. So Linda Chandler was the first to say, yes, I want to host Gidon Ariel here in Austin on Sunday morning.
That sounds biblical. I think the last shall be first, first shall be last.
That's right.
Very nice. So thank you. Our topic today is the Jewish-Christian relationship. The first question that I'd like to ask is the following.
Can you introduce us maybe? I don't know if everybody knows who we are.
All right. Well, in fact, I'll let you introduce yourself. I am Bob Odell. I am a friend and partner of Gidon Ariel in Root Source. I'm a resident of Austin, and I've been working with Gidon for 4 years now.
Okay, and my name is in fact Gidon Ariel. Gidon is, it's like Gideon, just take the E out of the middle and stick it on the end. Maybe the microphone, I hear some reverberation in the microphone. Maybe you can fix this so that it doesn't...
Maybe just get a little bit further, get the mic a little further from you.
No, even if I'm breathing, I can hear it. Okay, I'll get used to that, I guess. Maybe I'll pull it down like this. Can you all hear me? Yeah, I can hear myself a little better also.
Good.
Yeah, so Gidon Ariel. Gidon is like Gideon in the Bible, which interestingly means the one who cuts off or gouges. A little bit scary there. I'm really not like that, believe me. And Ariel is the Lion of God. It's the name that I chose for myself when I got married with my wife. Or my wife and I chose it or I chose it and she said, sure, Gidon, you choose our family name and I'll choose all of our children's names. It worked out well, Baruch Hashem, we were in the same thought. I moved to Israel from New York when I was about 14, and I've been living there ever since. And about 10 years after I moved to Israel, I realized that there is such a thing as Israel and Jew-loving Christians. Stop there.
Okay. Because I want you to start there, but I want to say something first.
Sure.
You have described yourself multiple times as a fairly traditional Orthodox Jew,
yes,
with one distinctive characteristic, that you interact with Christians regularly.
Yes.
So tell us, and start from that point, tell us, how did this begin?
The way that it began, or at least the way that I remind myself of the story, is that I was in the Israeli army, and I had a furlough. I was on vacation from the army, and I was walking through Jerusalem, and I saw a sign on the street, across the street. And it's one of my hobbies to read the street signs in Jerusalem. You know, you can get a bachelor's degree in Jewish history just by reading the street signs in Jerusalem. And I crossed the street and I saw a sign on an apartment, the ICEJ, International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. You must have heard the story about a dozen times at least. And I didn't know what that was. I looked inside and I saw some brochures, and somebody said, "Oh, can I help you?" I said, "No, just looking." And it was like for me, it was like a shrine of Christians loving Israel. And I said, "What the heck is this?" Because I was so used to, it's not like I had Christians hating me and attacking me my entire youth. But everybody knows that there's the Jews and there's the rest of the world. And the Christians are the rest of the world when you're in the United States, pretty much, or at least in those days. And so it was just a given that Christians are the enemies of Jews. So here we had Christians who were saying, no, we love Jews. And another thing that I learned when I was a kid is that when somebody extends their hand in friendship to you, then you grasp that hand and return it. So it was a little bit hard, but I succeeded, and I'd been pretty much searching out pro-Israel Christians. I call them pro-Israel Christians. Like so many things, there's a billion different ways to name something, but that's what stuck. And I've been collecting, especially since the internet started more or less at that time. I've been collecting more and more friends like that, and it's basically become my life's passion and mission to establish relationships between myself and individual Christians. And as I've learned, and I was thinking maybe even of praising God during the prayer part of our meeting today, for opening my eyes even more to the possibility that this is in fact my mission, to build the bridge between Christians and Jews. Not only myself, but so many more Jews that I am friends with are already on board, and those who are not yet on board.
Wonderful.
Amen.
You've got water there. Would someone mind bringing me my water there?
More than five.
Thank you. So I had an idea today on how to approach this topic. I would like to walk through a few key dates in history in ascending order and get some of your commentary about some of the things that have happened. The first item that you and I have spoken about in the past some is the story of the first Gentile Christian named Cornelius. And so I've talked about this, we've conversed about this in some way. I want to get your reaction to this. In Acts chapter 10, verse 1, it says, "Now there was a man at Caesarea, or Caesarea, as we often say."
Caesarea, as I always say.
There was a man at Caesarea named Cornelius, a centurion of what was called the Italian cohort, a devout man, and one who feared God with all his household, and gave many alms to the Jewish people and prayed to God continually. I've pointed out the fact in this passage that it's the way I look at it. I see a few significant things here. The story goes on to say how an angel appeared to this man, and then he met Peter, and then he was drawn into the family of believers in Yeshua. But when it talks about giving alms to the Jewish people, there's no distinction here. So he was in Caesarea, he was in the land of Israel. He was devout, says he feared God with all his household, and gave many alms to the Jewish people and prayed to God continually.
To the Jewish people or to Jewish people?
To the Jewish people is the way it's translated here.
Okay.
Clearly, this is not the number of followers of the Nazarite sect at that time was small as compared to the whole nation. Obviously, this is a general thing. Do you take any lesson, or do you think there's any lesson for Christians today from the story of the very first Christian, Cornelius? Gentile Christian.
That's a leading question, of course, and the answer, of course, is yes. I was astounded. I'll tell you the truth, Bob. I don't think I mentioned this before, and I hope nobody will mind my sacrilege. Before you talked to me about this story and about your commentary on it, I thought Cornelius was the hero of the Planet of the Apes, and that was about it. Which possibly was the reason that it was chosen, because there Cornelius is like the connection between the apes and the humans, and here we have somebody who's initiating the relationship between the non-Jews and the Jews. But we won't go any further there. But definitely, excuse me, I'll tell you, when I first read it, and certainly the part that you read over there, as you said, it doesn't mention Jesus at all.
Right.
And I don't know how much any Christian or even Jew, as I've seen, could see this story as what I see it in. I think that you see it in, at least strongly, and that is Cornelius was trying to connect to the people of Israel, the Jewish people, as the people of God. Even before they were followers of Jesus, even before he discovered the idea of following of Jesus, and continuing while he realized that he wants to be a follower of Jesus. In other words, his connection to the Jewish people began before he established a relationship with Jesus and continued after he established a relationship with Jesus. As it were, Jesus for him was an aspect, perhaps the most important aspect, but of the Jewish people.
Yes.
So that's something that we actually introduced this story to a Jewish person. I said, whoa, you're promoting Jesus too much over here. But I didn't see that at all. I saw it as a tremendous forebearer, a harbinger of the most important message that perhaps the New Testament has for a non-Jewish follower of Jesus. The first is always the most notable, and don't forget about the first. It might be before its time, but it's got the seed, the nucleus of the message. And so the message here is if you've got a relationship with Jesus, don't forget that the foundation of that message is a relationship with the people of God, and that is the Jewish people.
Yes, and I would, I love what you say, and I would say to my Christian friends that if you want to be a person who gets a revelation from God, who has put in a special place and has an opportunity to do groundbreaking things, then perhaps there's a message there too, that his relationship with the Jewish peoples created a platform for which God could speak to him and do some amazing things.
Amen.
So anyway, this is if there isn't a better calling card for having a relationship with the Jewish people today, even from the standpoint of, hey, I want more revelation from God. Okay, there's a hint there if you want to take it. Okay, now that was in about 40 AD, about 7 years after Jesus. And let's push way into the future. I want to push all the way to a year that will live in infamy for the Jewish people, the year 1492. The year when the entire Jewish population of Spain, anyone who wanted to continue to hold to their Jewish teaching, was expelled by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. And we cannot escape the fact that they felt that they were operating under the auspices of the Catholic Church, led out of Rome. Now, just notice Cornelius came from Rome, and that was something very good. But centuries later, and of course there's been many, many terrible things done by Christians. But I think this is just so pivotal, it's so horrible, and I'm coming to a question, but I want to set a couple more facts. The Jewish people were expelled. Essentially, the date of their expulsion was the 9th of Av of that year, a day that lives in infamy for the Jewish people. But God did two things right about that date also, for good. One thing was, we know that Christopher Columbus sailed. And so he launched. A couple days after that, his boat was launched. It was commissioned by the same king and queen. He was a Christian. Some people say he may have Jewish descent, don't know. But in any rate, that began to open up the New World, which would be a safe place some centuries later, a safe place for Jews. So that's one thing that God did, but that wasn't a provision that could happen right away. It took hundreds of years. So I want to call out the other major figure in this story that is not well known, the Suleiman, the head of the Turkish Empire, Suleiman the Magnificent, who in 1492 said, when he heard about this, that the king and queen were idiots for getting rid of the Jewish people. And he had control of the entire Mediterranean at the time. And he sent his army, recommissioned the boats of the army to go to Spain and pick up as many of the Jews as wanted to get on his boats, and distributed them around the Mediterranean Sea. And provided safe passage for them and said, I want them. These are good people. These will help build my empire well. I want them. So here we have Christian, Jewish, and Muslim. But it's kind of all wrapped up in a weird sort of way, isn't it? What do you make of that?
Oh my. I wish I could look this up on Wikipedia right now. First time I've heard of that, Bob. You really sprung this on me.
Well, take it as
I would say that this is a God thing. We said before, the last shall be first. I think that is a recurring topic, a recurring theme in the Bible. And I think that's what we see over here. Where you least expect it. I think that if you're expecting the Christians to be good and the Muslims to be bad, well, sometimes it works the other way around. And he's expecting the Jews to be on the bottom. Well, sometimes they end up on top at the same time. And it's all just rolling around. I think it has a lot to do with, if you think you got the story down pat and it's time to put that story aside and deal with other things, go take that out again because you didn't understand even half of it. And I read the book Israel First. And so I know that this kind of story is a really important one. He just happened to have it in his back pocket.
Literally.
And you've written a lot of ideas here that really turn history on its head, like I said. And I would recommend it to anybody who hasn't gotten their copy of it to read it, because it's a very interesting perspective on all of history.
Secular history looks at the Ottoman Empire and says it was never stronger than in the decades of the 1490s and the early 1500s. And it is interesting that Suleiman the Magnificent got, and I would say it this way, got the honor of taking Jerusalem in 1517. And then got the honor of building the walls of the old city, rebuilding the walls of the old city that as we see them today. Wow. Suleiman the Magnificent. Now, in the year 1517,
yes,
there is a strange coincidence.
Another one.
Because not only did this Muslim leader take Jerusalem, but I believe a clock started ticking in God's timetable then, a clock that started ticking to start bringing the Jewish people home. And in the very same year, 1517, Martin Luther, who is revered by the Protestants especially, began his Reformation and sent the letter to the bishops saying, "Here's 95 reasons that the Catholic, what's wrong with the Catholic Church." And I'm not trying to say this talk is not against the Catholic. Our history is our history. Martin Luther has a horrible history regarding the Holocaust later and what was done in his name. So it's equal opportunity criticism, but 1517 seemed to be an important year and started a series of sevens where an important year ending in 7 ends up affecting world history. Maybe we'll be touching on some of that. But so Jerusalem, the Jews, Muslim taking Jerusalem, and a Protestant reformer that, although he was an anti-Semite personally, the fact that he turned his disciples to read the Bible for themselves, the truth eventually came out. And people like me eventually heard it from our Christian forefathers that, hey, God has not turned his back on Israel, that those Jewish people will come out. So that's a long, that's me talking more than you answering. So I want to set the stage. That's mainly to set the stage for some things I want to talk to you about.
Okay.
Anything else you want to say?
No.
Okay, all right. So let me move on to another date. I want to move to 1883. This is a surprise. I love to surprise members as well. This is a surprise. But the first Aliyah
1883
is 1882, 83. It really began right in that. That's where they go back and they look at that. And by 1883, it began to be known that the Jews were returning, to Israel.
Okay.
Now, I want to read a passage in Ezekiel, chapter 37. The beginning of the chapter is the famous dry bones passage, where Ezekiel is commanded to prophesy to these dry bones. In verse 5, "Thus says the Lord God to these bones, Behold, I will cause breath to enter you, that you may come to life. I will put sinews on you, make flesh grow back on you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you, that you may come alive, and that you will know that I am the Lord." this passage has generally been considered by the Jewish people to be a look at the Holocaust, and that coming out of the massive destruction of the Holocaust was essentially a resurrection of the nation and the people coming back to the land. I agree with that, okay? But I see this passage as beginning with the first Aliyah in 1882, 1883, and I'd like to tell you why I think that and get your reaction.
You're talking about verse 6?
Verses 6, but actually in verse 7, Ezekiel says, "So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, a rattling, and the bones came together, bone to its bone."
Okay.
So I believe that that verse has a fulfillment in 1883, and I'd like to explain why.
Okay.
Because if it weren't for this verse, and it weren't for this thought that I had about this verse, a connection, I don't think I'd be sitting next to you today. It was this verse. I gave a talk on this verse at a conference in Dallas in 2013. It wasn't anything to do with the Jews. It was actually about Muslims and the dreams that many Muslims are having about Jesus and so forth. But I pointed out that this verse had a very interesting connection between the Muslims and the Jews. And it was my comment about this verse, connecting the Muslims and the Jews together, that caused Christine Darg to walk up to me afterwards and say, "Bob, I want you to come to Jerusalem next January to my prayer conference and speak." Okay, so now I'd like to tell you, and maybe I've mentioned this to you before, but I think it's been several years if I have.
Yeah.
So I'd like to tell you about what happened on August 27th, 1883. At the same time that the first Aliyah was beginning to happen and word was getting out, I came upon a fact. Does anyone know what was the loudest noise that ever occurred in the history of the world?
At least one person in this room knows.
And the hint is that it also caused an earthquake. Let's read the verse again in verse 7. "So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, behold, there was a noise." The word there is call, like also can be translated thunder. And
Or a coal.
Coal. "And behold, a rattling, a ra'ash, which can also be translated earthquake."
Yes.
So I was doing some research in 2013. And discovered a fact. Do you take a quick technical
No, I
break
turned this
here?
off because it bothers me too much.
She can't hear if it's off.
Okay, but I haven't said anything, and I can't hear myself because of the noise that it's
Okay,
making.
well, I'll fix it.
Gary.
I'll speak up louder, don't worry.
Okay. So, the loudest noise that ever occurred in the world in recorded human history was Krakatoa, the volcano Krakatoa that exploded on August 27th, 1883. It was on the 24th of Av on the Jewish calendar. And it exploded on an island between East and West Java in Indonesia. There were 4 explosions that happened in succession, but the 4th was the largest and loudest. An island, it was absolutely deafening. Any ships in the area, the sailors lost their hearing. It was so bad. An island 3,000 miles away reported cannon blasts, as if there were ships off the coast firing cannons at them.
3,000 miles away.
3,000 miles away heard cannon blasts as if ships were firing cannons at the island. There were tsunamis that occurred from this explosion that reached all 7 continents. Wow. There were pressure waves that pushed around the earth and circled the earth 7 times. I kid you not, 7 times it circled the earth over a period of 5 days. Barographs that were just invented a few years ago and installed at major cities all around the world picked up and saw this thing happen. The skies were darkened for 5 years because of the volcanic ash, and the temperature was reduced by an average of a couple of degrees. There was more energy in these explosions than in any war. If you take all the explosions that come up in a war, more energy in this.
Where's all this information coming from?
All Wikipedia, just general physics sources here. So I made the point that at the time when the Jewish people were returning and the word was going out, that this volcano went off from around the world. Now, why Indonesia? Because interestingly, in Indonesia, 100 miles away, for the first time in Christian history, Muslims were starting to turn to Jesus. And Indonesia, under the leadership of a guy named Sadrak, a local Indonesian evangelist, Christian evangelist, led more than 1,000 people more than 1,000 Muslims to be baptized. That also, the word was getting out also in 1883. So I made a connection saying, does God's heart for the Muslim people connected with God's heart for the Jewish people, the Jews, and the nations? Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Sounds good. I'm not a man of many words. What can I say? Bob, you bring out stuff that nobody ever noticed. And it's just wild. And I recommend everybody to look this stuff up. And I think we have a blog post about this on Root Source, so you can check it up there. It'll probably be the most concentrated source for this kind of information.
I've struggled with, this is 1883. It wasn't a year ending in 7. Like a lot of things tend to line up on 7s. But you know what hit me? This 50 years from this, 1883, you add 50, you get to 1933. Also, in the fall of 1933, you have the Kristallnacht. And the beginning, the pushing into the darkness that was going to bring the resurrection of this. So I even see a connection between that and the...
Okay. All in favor say yay.
Okay, let's move. 1917. Here's a year ending in 7. The Brits issue a Balfour Declaration to give that the Jews should have a homeland of their own. They conquer Beersheba, which is the key to Palestine, and then go on to take Jerusalem on that year, 400 years after the 15-year. And then the Jews are already in the land. And then once again, the Muslims dissuade the United Kingdom in a period of about 5 years, dissuade them from their mandate. Mm-hmm. So here again, Jews, Christians, Christian nation, Muslims, all tied in together in the story.
That's for sure. And we see that until today, but I bet you have a few more dates that you want me to say yes about.
1947, the UN vote for Israel. What do you think? I think what does it mean for Jews, and how should Christians process the enormity of that date?
Okay, first of all, you have 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So whenever you ask me a question, what does that mean for Jews? I wonder how exact I can be. But I would say that the bell curve of Jews recognizes that this is something that hasn't happened in 2,000 years, that the Jews are being given a certification, license to return to the land of Israel and establish a nation state, independent, Jews leading themselves. There was spontaneous, instantaneous dancing all over the world, even in Jerusalem. That was followed by the outbreak of the Independence War, Israel's defensive war, launched upon them by the surrounding Arabs and Arab nations. So that's why people, even to this day, Jews are wondering, don't be too loud, don't try to push things. But we're pushing, and we're seeing how things are going, and with God's help. And I think that's how it started out also in 1947, as you mentioned, and before.
The original mandate for Israel did not include Jerusalem, but there was a war right away in 48. By 49, the Jews had, there was a sort of an armistice line, and the Jews had West Jerusalem, but did not have the old city of Jerusalem. As far as I can reckon, there was, and that began a period of 19 years, when the Jews had no access to the Western Wall. As far as I can reckon, that's the first time in 2,000 years that they didn't have access to the Western Wall for a period of a long period like that.
Okay.
So in 1967,
Yes.
another 7 years, this time 450 years from the Suleiman the Magnificent taking Jerusalem, then Jerusalem returns to the Jewish people in total.
Yes.
What does that mean to the Jews?
It's an amazing miracle, and it really lit on fire the imagination of many people who wouldn't have thought about it before. As much as the 6-Day War ignited, it seems to me, the argument between the left and the right in Israel. To this day, what does this mean? How much of it is important? How much the liberation of even Jerusalem, but certainly of the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. Some Jews say, why do we need this? Some Jews say, this is what we're here for. But not only from Israel politics, but in the Jewish people in general saw this great, amazing miracle, and it made many Jews who weren't so Jewish, as it were. Their Jewish identity was not number one for them. And that was when the Teshuvah movement started growing, which means the movement of restoration, the movement of return of individual Jews who said, I want to have more Jewish identity as part of my identity. And that is something that is making its mark to this very day.
Interesting you say that Jews felt a return to their own Jewish identity.
Sure.
Because when we look back at the Christian history, we would say that you can trace back the Jewish roots movement essentially back to that same event. That it awakened Christians to this idea of the importance of Jerusalem and the importance of Israel and the Jews.
It was a real Krakatoa of Jewish identity, yes.
Very good. And
Got you there.
yeah, that's good. And so today we have many believers in Yeshua,
Yes.
many Christians that feel an increasing kinship with the Jewish people or the land of Israel and or the Torah.
Yes.
And so we have this phenomena that you've stepped into personally of connecting with Christians at a time when now we've come 50 years past 1967 to 2017. Capped off perhaps by Donald J. Trump's proclamation a month ago that United States shall recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Yes.
Are we living in important times or what?
Yes, not or what. You've brought up something interesting here about that Krakatoa, 1883, other stuff here that I've already managed to forget, things that people didn't notice so much. I think that what we are going to be seeing will make Donald Trump's declaration in 2017 to be forgotten, because it's like the lighting of the match of the Great Chicago Fire.
Wow.
It's just a match,
Wow.
but what we're going to be seeing is much greater stuff like that. And people forget that date, I think.
What do you think God is doing in this connection that is growing between Jews and Christians?
I think it's still very early to know. I mean, I have a bunch of pro-Israel Christian friends personally, and I know of the movement of so many people that I have not yet to meet. So I've got my work cut out for me. And on the Jewish side, there are more and more Jews who even come up to me and say, "Gidon, help us understand this phenomenon. It's something new. We've never had Jews having Christian friends." What I mentioned before, something that happened almost 30 years ago, is happening to other people today. And but it's still such a small phenomenon compared to everything that's going on in the world, and specifically for Jews and for Israel. So I think that we're really at the starting line of what I think is going to be the most important aspect of all of these end times redemptive historical movements. There's no question that the historical movement of the Jewish people returning to its land is something that has been prophesied countless times in the Bible. And so to say, oh, it's no big deal, it's just another national movement that started 100 years ago and it's happening all over the place, it's not such a big deal. No. That's not God talking. What God is talking about, I'm bringing my people home, and that has been the most important prophetic, impactful theme that has brought people like me closer to their Jewish identity, decided to move to the land of Israel to get front row seats for it. But I'm daring to say, and I'm just finding this out this week while I'm here, and more talking about it and thinking about it, I think that the ultimate goal of God is that which Jews pray, traditional Jews pray at least 3 times a day, L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to fix the world under the dominion of the Lord, of the God of Abraham. So we pray that, and we say it, we sing it even, but that's 4 words. We pray about 2 hours every day. So it doesn't. People don't notice it so much, especially since, as it was authored, that prayer, it is something for the future. So people have a box for the future, and when that future starts happening, then a lot of people don't recognize it. They say, this certainly cannot be what we were praying for, because what we're praying for happens in the future, and now it's not the future, now it's the present. So it can't be that. We're waiting for the future. But no, the future is happening. And I think, and again, that phrase, L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to fix the whole world under the dominion of God, is the ultimate, as verses in the Bible proclaim. For the whole world shall be covered with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the land. I didn't get the English translation right. I was translating from the Hebrew directly. But that is the point. Once that happens, what happens after that? What are we going to pray about when every single person in the world has a personal relation with God? That's it. That is the end of the end times. And that was capsulated in these 4 words that I mentioned. In Hebrew, it's 4 words: to fix the world under the dominion of God. But the Jews have not been used to thinking in those terms. That's those 4 words. They're stuck in the middle of that prayer. We say it at the end of every prayer. But we got a long way to go for that. Meanwhile, let's concentrate on, oh God, heal me. Oh God, bring the Jews back to the land of Israel. Oh God, give me, let me have enough money so that I can serve you. And all sorts of the prayers that we focus on most, which are very personal prayers, even though with Jews it's a national prayer anyway. We always pray for more, not just for ourselves. But this idea of the future, first, the future of the return to Zion, was something that Jews didn't get at the beginning. And even till today, there's many Jews who aren't so sure, wait a second, is this from God? Is it not from God? Is this important? Is it not important? Is it crazy? Here we have the actual finalization of all of these prophecies, and people are just wondering, was that a wind I just felt? But here is what happens after that. Because God is the God of the entire world. He created the Jewish people in order to get through to the entire world. And I think that's what's happening. I think that through Christians, we're getting through to the entire world. Not only, now we've got the internet, and so people can turn on the channel and see the Jewish people directly, but the Christians have a part in this for sure. And so the most important way to have that part is to have a relationship, to have a partnership between Jews and Christians. And that's the craziest thing. And I feel like and you and I, Bob, and I'm inviting everybody else here to join in, because that is where it is. Here we are in a small church, in a small city, in a small state, no, big state. What happens then? This is it. It's not just front row seats. It's to dive in and be that which God prophesied, God promised. And it's not just another incredible, amazing promise. It is the ultimate end game finish line of the promises. And that's what we're talking about over here. It's crazy stuff.
You know, I think one of the biggest things that's happened in me personally through my relationship with you and being involved in this partnership for the last 4 years is this idea of pulling it in. Looking out into what is prophesied and what is going to be, and see how can we pull it in now? Don't wait for this, that, and that, and that happen and all to line up and then okay, then we're walking through that door. No, is there something that we can do now together, like we're doing, right? What we're doing together. Pull it in, pull in whatever we can into the present. That is a change in my heart. Let me give you an example of it from you. When the blood moons were coming in around, and it was, what's going to happen? Is it the end of the world and all this? You had this idea, and I was not as bold this was you that said it first. You had an interpretation for what God might want to be saying through this, and here's what you said. Or would you like to read it instead, or want me to read what you said?
You read it.
Okay. You said, in Jewish tradition, the Jewish people are likened in many traditional parables to the moon, and the nations of the world are likened to the sun. There are many ideas that branch out from this, but I think the tremendous interest in the current eclipses and blood moons emphasizes the relationship between these two celestial bodies, and in turn, the relationship between the Jewish people and the nations. Throughout Jewish history, there is an almost uninterrupted tradition of fear and suspicion by Jews for the rest of the nations, with, I might add, good reason. But in our generation, we are noticing a tremendous outpouring of tshuva, repentance, on the part of many righteous Christians, recognizing the historical wrongs perpetrated by Christians against Jews, remorse, and attempt to right these wrongs. This year's blood moon phenomena is perhaps actually a message from God to the Jewish people to recognize that this outreaching and friendship by Christians is a sign for us to recognize the sincerity of that overture and to work together to bring about the expansion of the knowledge of God amongst Jews, Christians, and all the people worldwide.
Amen.
Amen.
That's
I
an
couldn't have said
amazing-
it better myself.
So you're saying that perhaps this relationship between Jews and Christians is the biggest thing that God might be having on his heart in this period of time.
I think more than just in this period of time. I think that I challenge Bible scholars to propose what is bigger than that. What is beyond the entire world getting together and believing and fellowshipping, if you will, with the Lord God. That's the whole point of the whole world.
Yeah.
For the whole world to be one with God.
Amen.
So if I can break down, if I can change, how do you say that? To break down and to change into nickels and dimes, we're talking about, at the very least, Jews and Christians. Okay, maybe there'll be a bigger miracle with Muslims. Maybe even a bigger miracle with the Hootsie Tootsies. I don't know, all sorts of.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people don't have any idea about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the God of the Bible? Okay, obviously that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much bigger it's going to be, how different it's going to be, but right now I think, again, I'm guessing. I think that what I see, the tremendous efforts of Christians to spread Christianity to the the unknowing, to the unreached. So you're building the bridge. Those Christians bringing Christianity to the unguarded is a bridge for God through the Jews, through the Christians, to all the world, and that's great. I'd love to be more of a supporter of missionaries to the unguarded. I have a friend in Israel who is hush-hush. He goes out to Palestinians and brings them to Christianity.
Oh,
And I say, praise the Lord.
praise God.
I wish that all of these Palestinians would become Christians. I haven't seen too many suicide bombing Christians. And I think that if we would get to more of these suicide bombing Muslims or potential terrorists, then there would be less terror. I think that supporting a Christian missionaries in the Palestinian authorities should go on the Israeli Ministry of Defense budget because it's helping there be less terror. That's what the point. So that's just an example, and not to mention the people who are sacrificing their children to some god in a tree or something like that in Asia or in Africa or I don't know where. That is ancient paganism that the Jews have to fight against, and I think the Christians also. So we're working on this together.
Yes.
So and I think that's what we're up to.
Last question.
Last question for you. Maybe there'll be some more questions for me.
The passage that we read in Ezekiel 37, the dry bones, that passage is followed by an amazing passage. And my question to you is, do you have any idea what you think this might mean? The word of the Lord came again to me, saying, "And you, son of man, take for yourself
What
one
verse
stick."
is this? What verse is this?
15, Ezekiel 37, verse
Yeah,
15. The word of the Lord came again to me, saying, "And you, son of man, take for yourself one stick and write on it for Judah, and for the sons of Israel, his companions. And take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel and his companions. Then join them for yourself, one to another, into one stick, that they may become one in your hand."
Well, It has been said, I don't know how many people have heard this, that Isaiah 53 is the forbidden chapter. That the Jews don't teach Isaiah 53 because it's so clear that that's a chapter about Jesus, and they want to hide that. Well, guess what? It's not a forbidden chapter, and the Jews have an understanding of it without Jesus. Sorry, but that's the fact. I'm bringing that up because this seems to be an aspect of a forbidden chapter. Now, it's not a forbidden chapter. We've heard this, and I think it might even be one of the haftorahs, one of the annual readings. But the first part of that chapter, the dry bones, finishes off with 14. And I will give you my spirit in you, and you will be alive, and I will put you on your land, and you will know that I am the God. I spoke and I did. Thus saith the Lord. And that's the end of that chapter, or so we thought when we read it on Independence Day. That is the reading for Israel Independence Day. And it also, I think, is the reading in Passover. And Passover and Independence Day are related. But it stops there. But it doesn't. Because the next verse is in the same chapter. And there was the word of God was on me, and you bring one tree, and together Judah and Israel, all of its friends. So again, the understanding of this has nothing to do with Christians. It's Judah and Israel. That's fine. We're all Jews here. But I think that this idea of bringing Jews and Christians together is coming from this verse, coming from this chapter. And that's something that Jews are, most Jews are just like, well, what do I do with that? And that can't be. I mean, but Jews are starting to talk about it. Jews are starting to talk about that. Exactly how it's going to be. I mean, really, we're talking about a courtship here, Bob. We're talking about people courting, and you never know if what you're going to say is too much too soon, or not enough, not soon enough. And so it's a mystery. It's a mystery. So we're courting over here. And, you know, if I court too fast with somebody, then my parents are going to say, or my family or my friends are going to say, "Whoa, slow down with that person." You know, Romeo and Juliet, forget it. You know, but I think that's what's going on over here. We've got what is ultimately going to be the most important love story, human love story. It's an important love story for the Jews, seeing that Joseph and Judah come together. But I think, as you said, it's like a metaphor for the Jewish people and the rest of the people coming together. Not sure exactly how it goes, and I'm not giving this as a teaching. I don't have the sources to back it up. But that's what I'm feeling in my heart. And you folks are my heart, because you guys are filling up my heart with the love that you have for the Jewish people. I humbly propose myself as a representative of these Jewish people, and we're going places. So that's my answer. What does this mean to me? It means we're going places. And it looks like we're going places.
Thank you.
If there's somebody who wants to do a question, that's great. But I really love that analogy of a courtship. Because a long time ago, God said, you don't need to make anybody believe anything, but you need to honor and respect
Amen.
my children.
Well done.
That's
And
it.
but I'd say it on the other side also, that as we come to the Jewish people, that they honor and respect, which I see that, and I'm seeing that more and more with the ones that we've had here. You know, we're just open, we worship who brought us in.
Yes.
We're very comfortable with that because he's a Jewish rabbi and he's our Messiah.
Yeah.
And so I really, I love that imagery of courtship. So,
Sounds
you know,
very wise, doesn't it?
so right hand to right hand.
Thank you.
All right. Right.
We're glad to have you here today. So,
Yeah, because somehow I feel that it's kind of taking, because I know there's such a limited space over there. You know, that's why they're trying to build more.
Yes,
And
yes.
they get,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
crap about that and, you know, about making more settlements. So it seems like there's limited land and places to live. You don't think
The
so?
land of Israel
Where
is...
if the Christians come over, that gives even less. for
No.
the Jews to come back
No way.
to their
The
land.
land of Israel is one of its nicknames is the land of the heart. And not only the heart, Heart, but H-A-R-T. A hart is like a gazelle, a deer. So the land, Eretz HaTzvi, means, this is from the sages. 2,000 years ago they wrote that the land contracts and expands to take in its sons and daughters. So the Peel Commission, which was one of the commissions of the British to figure out what's going on here in the land of Israel, in the Holy Land, they said there's not even room for one more chicken in the Holy Land. This was in 1930 when there was about 600,000 Jews, or probably at that point closer to 300 or 400,000 Jews. And it's a joke. Today there's 8 million Jews or 7 million Jews and 9 million people, and believe me, easily another 9 million without any question. And then we can start thinking about building skyscrapers. I mean, Israel is the size of New Jersey, and there's a lot of wide open spaces in New Jersey. So if necessary, we'll do it more. And if necessary, who knows, God will say, you know what, don't look only at the Jordan River as your border. There was a certain promise to a certain Abraham. We'll see what happens. I'm not suggesting anything, but nothing is too big or too small for our Lord.